Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. The time 1,500 or so podcasts from around the globe join together to highlight as many charitable organizations as possible edition. Today is a bonus. It's Podcasthon 2025. Let's change the world. For the better this time. My friends, there is a long list of reasons why I started this, dare I say, amazing podcast 4 years ago. One, I wanted a show that brought together a unique set of people who not only wanted to know more about this world of ours, the universe it's hurling through, and all the creatures, great and small, in between, but for those who have an equally exceptional sense of humor about it all, and understand a well-placed F-bomb for emphasis and clarity. That's you, and me, and over 2,400 subscribers on Spotify alone, and lots more over on Apple at the time I'm recording this in February. That is a huge flock, and it continues to grow, so please, keep doing what you're doing. And that leads me to the second reason. You extraordinary people have been talking to other extraordinary people about the beautiful, horrifying, borderline disgusting, miraculous discoveries I've covered over the years. You're spreading knowledge, telling stories, and having a good fucking time while doing so. You're also hitting that follow button, leaving comments on the socials, sprinkling 5 stars on your podcast app's rating system, or giving a thumbs up. These aren't small gestures. They really do help smart, kooky folks find each other and this show. And this leads me to number 3. When we find each other and band together, shit happens. And I'm talking good shit too. Today I have the honor of introducing you to Podcasthon, a truly global movement where podcasters from all walks of life come together and dedicate a week out of the year to amplify the works of charities and inspire change. From March 15th to the 21st, if you search Podcasthon or Podcasthon 2025 on Instagram or Blue Sky and the TikToks, you'll literally find thousands of episodes focusing exclusively on nonprofits that podcasters want to shine a light on, and hopefully raise awareness and maybe some donations too. Just a few months ago, in episode 220, giant rats could soon fight the illegal wildlife trade, and an extinct tortoise has been found alone on a remote island, I had another honor of introducing the flock to volunteers, researchers, and the workers of the nonprofit Apopo, who dedicate their lives to training the multi-talented African giant pouched rat how to safely detect landmines, the pathogen that causes tuberculosis, and to pick up on the scent of elephant tusks and rare plants and so much more. As we speak, they're being trained to actually intercept the illegal wildlife trade. And my fingers are crossed. There's going to be an 8-part Netflix series inspired by this, and it's going to be a combo with a vibe that's like The Killing meets The Jinx. Anyway, also, in that episode, we learned about the queen of her own island, Fernanda, who is being pampered by another nonprofit called the Giant Tortoise Restoration Initiative, aka Iniciativa Galapagos. Nailed it. As stated on Galapagos.org, quote, the long-term goal of the initiative is to restore tortoise populations to their historical distribution and numbers across Galapagos, including on islands where tortoises went extinct. End quote. I'm dusting off episode 220 and replaying it for this monumental week. If you haven't had a listen about these hero rats and Our Lady Fernanda and how you can give, please do. If you already had a listen but want a refresher, just stick around for the details. Also, links to Apopo and the Giant Tortoise Restoration Initiative websites are also in the show notes. Just click on this episode title and scroll down. In the meantime, hi, I'm Jill Chacha. And if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my generous business goose. A full brand new episode will drop next week, and it's thousands of years in the making. Thank you again for being so awesome. Happy Podcasthon. Let's make some fucking positive change. And please, stay interesting. Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. That's really great news. I didn't know that was possible anymore edition. Today is episode 220, giant rats could soon fight the illegal wildlife trade, and an extinct tortoise has been found, alone, on a remote island. My friends, this might be the episode that has you exploding with joy at both ends. And you know what? It's high time. I think we deserve it. Let's treat ourselves to the following. In the first half of the show, you're going to see photos of rats in tiny vests. And that thing is going to happen where the cuteness level is so overwhelming, you feel aggression and chest pain. I am serious, you're going to want to smush them. If you're a long-time listener of this show, then the remarkable, endearing, impressive creature called the giant African pouched rat should sound familiar. In June of 2023, we learned more than we ever wanted to about this animal because, well, to put it mildly, this rat is a miracle worker for a number of reasons. Back in the milestone, that was episode 140, insect that flings pee with a butt catapult, and rats that can seal up their vaginas. Yes, we learned a lot, and we learned that this particular animal can seal up their vagina to prevent pregnancies. And if you haven't had a listen as to why and how, and you're leaning in, well, I'm not going to give it all away here, but it does involve females taking turns as to who gives birth and who helps nanny. They have a whole system for it. You should tune in. That was episode 140. Now, that behavioral and anatomical fact is something else, but it's not the most eyebrow-raising thing about them. Not by a long shot. These rats help save human lives. We also learned that the African giant pouched rat has been trained to detect explosives like landmines and the pathogen that causes tuberculosis. The extraordinary volunteers, researchers, and workers of the nonprofit Apopo dedicate their lives to a simple but profound mission as stated on their site, apopo.org. Quote, to protect people and the planet with innovative solutions using trained rats and other scent detection animals. Landmines not only cause tragic accidents, they are a barrier to development, constraining communities and denying access to fertile land, travel routes, and basic needs. Apopo's hero rats and hero dogs perform complementary roles, making them the perfect tool for speeding up detection and clearance. Tuberculosis is the biggest global killer from an infectious disease after COVID-19. There were approximately 10.6 million new global cases of tuberculosis per year, and around 1.3 million people died from the disease in 2022. In most sub-Saharan African countries, only about half of the patients with active tuberculosis are diagnosed. A TB detection rat can check 100 samples for TB in as little as 20 minutes. This would typically take a lab technician up to 4 days using conventional microscopy. End quote. My friends, these intelligent, gentle animals with a lifespan of a wee 8 years start training at the wee age of 4 weeks. We will review how the beautiful people of the nonprofit Apopo actually train these rats and why they're an excellent choice for this work. And that will lead us to the next venture on the horizon. These superheroes and their super scent abilities are now being trained to detect and intercept objects in the illegal wildlife trade. We will meet the 11 cuties that, at the time of my writing these notes in November of 2024, they are currently undergoing rigorous classes to learn what to identify. As to those classes and what they need to detect, we will get into it. And how you can donate to this nonprofit that I believe is actually making a positive impact for humans and creatures alike. Then after the break, the last time a member of the giant Galapagos tortoise species Chelonoidis fantasticus, nailed it, the last time it was seen was 1906. And as the decades went by, as they added up to a century, without a second sighting, hearts broke around the world. Although not completely official, C. fantasticus was believed to have succumbed to extinction. But, believe it or not, this possible extinction wasn't due to us humans this time around. C. fantasticus was thought to have gone extinct due to volcanic activity on their remote home called Fernandina. In just the past 200 years alone, over 24 eruptions occurred on an island that is, by all accounts, a tiny fucking island. So how could a large, slow creature like C. fantasticus escape, hide, and survive? Well, at least one tortoise has. Yes, a tortoise sighting went down in 2019, and ecology and evolutionary biologists went bananas. After rounds of genetic tests were performed on a sample from this lone girl, they got more questions than answers. We're going to get into those tests. We're going to meet this tortoise, and we're going to run through the hypotheses on how in the holy hell she's been kicking it on Fernandina for decades. In the meantime, hi, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my miraculous business goose. To begin, I'm going to need you to slap on your finest black tie attire, run a lint roller over it, and then I'm going to ask you to hop into the old time machine with me, because we're heading on over to an award ceremony unlike any other. It's September of 2020, which means this award ceremony, like nearly everything else in the world at the time, took place virtually. But that's not the historic part. Let me tell you a little bit about our award recipient, our gold medal award recipient named Magawa. He was born in Tanzania and quickly found his talent and calling, saving lives by detecting landmines and unexploded munitions. This was his day job. Magawa's skills were so exceptional, he was called to active duty in a region of the world that has the heartbreaking title of a country with one of the most dangerous countrysides, Cambodia. According to the halotrust.org, those landmines were laid during the ousting of the Khmer Rouge in 1979. And throughout the 80s and 90s, they had a, quote, devastating impact on the people of Cambodia. Over 65,000 casualties have been recorded since 1979, resulting in 18,800 people being killed and nearly 45,000 people being injured, of whom 9,087 had to have amputations due to their injuries, end quote. Now, on one hand, more than half of Cambodia's minefields have been cleared. But on the other, it's believed there are up to 6 million landmines remaining. 6 million. Those remaining are concentrated in the rural northwest of the country, along the Thai border, on a 750-kilometer or 460-ish mile area known as the K5. As the country's population expands, civilians have little choice but to move out and onto these literal minefields. This is where Magawa MacGyvered and went to work. From 2016 to 2021, Magawa cleared more than 56 acres, and in that time, he found 71 landmines and 38 instances of some other unexploded ordnance, aka fucking bombs. Now, I'm no mathematician, but my clickety-clack calculations are anyway, that's 109 people that Magawa saved from grievous or bodily harm. Now, Magawa eventually retired from bomb detection in June of 2021 due to his old age. He was 7. Because I forgot to mention, Magawa is an African giant-pouched rat. He's a rat. And just before his complete retirement, he gave a little more. He spent a number of weeks mentoring 20 newly recruited rats before kicking back to a life of, quote, snacking on bananas and peanuts, end quote, from Antonia Nori Farzan of the Washington Post. Now, I think I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, God, I have to do more with my life. But really? A rat? How does that even happen? How do you train a rat to find bombs? Who did this? How do they not set off those landmines? And what award did he get, by the way? I am sweating in this outfit. Well, great questions, my lovely-looking business goose. First, you're doing enough. Don't feel intimidated by Magawa. Second, the award is the PDSA Gold Medal. And to help explain what that is and why it's the highest honor an animal can receive, I'm going to let the extremely British John Smith, the PDSA chair, explain. I have screenshots of this video over at our social media stuffs, but if you want to watch along, all you have to do is head on over to the tube of you. Search Hero Rat Magawa, awarded PDSA Gold Medal, and a video from PDSA will pop up. Now, let's have a listen to what the fuck this is, and I suggest having Kleenex within reach. You might, I'm already tearing up. You're going to feel some feels. Here we go.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in and joining us at PDSA as we are about to make history. Not only will this be the first time that we've ever presented a PDSA Animal Award in this way, by means of a virtual presentation, but, and more importantly, this is the very first time in our 77-year history of honouring animals that we will have presented a medal to a rat. More on our very special recipient shortly. But first, I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about why we take the time to pause and to highlight the incredible role animals play in our lives and their contribution to society.
Heroes come in all shapes and sizes, but all of them have big hearts and brave spirits. During the Second World War, an award was created to honour military animals who showed gallantry and devotion to duty in times of conflict. The PDSA Dickin Medal, named after our founder Maria Dickin, is the highest honour that can be bestowed on an animal and is recognised around the world as the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross. Since this prestigious award was instituted, we've honoured dogs, pigeons, horses, and a cat. All showed conspicuous gallantry in the face of conflict, falling bombs, chaos, and flames.
I just want to pause at 158 real quick because I want to talk about Teddy the Cockapoo. Yes, Teddy the Cockapoo, I think, which is a mix between a Cocker Spaniel and a Poodle. They were honored back in April of 2018 for, quote, life-saving devotion to her family, alerting them when their young son climbed into the tumble dryer and became trapped as the cycle triggered. Teddy's actions prevented the young boy from suffering life-threatening injuries, end quote. So, from World War II to dryers, heroism is everywhere. Tomato, tomato. Let's continue.
We've honoured animals for their intelligence and skill, their loyalty and devotion, even laying down their lives for the people they love. But such acts of gallantry aren't only found in war. For those animals who show life-saving bravery and devotion in civilian life, we award the PDSA Gold Medal, the Animals George Cross.
Okay, my friends, there you have it. My teary-eyed business goose, that is the PDSA Gold Medal. It's the non-military counterpart to the PDSA Dickin Medal. You know the one, and is basically the equivalent of the Victoria Cross, the George Cross, or the Presidential Medal of Freedom, basically. It's a fresh new award on the scene, having been instituted in 2002, but it's been rewarding civilian acts of animal bravery and exceptional devotion to duty ever since. Now, as to how Magawa reached such a level of accomplishment, well, he certainly didn't act alone. This video goes on to reveal a little bit about the nonprofit Apopo, the ingenious training process, and the workers of Apopo who join their African pouch rats colleagues and enter these dangerous places alongside them. So, let's have a listen to Christoph Cox, Apopo CEO and co-founder, at the 6-minute, 50-second mark. I'm pulling it up right here, and here we go.
Apopo started after an analysis of the landmine problem showed that, in fact, the detection of the landmines was the most expensive and tedious part of the problem. That's why we came up with the idea of using rats, because rats are fast. They can screen an area of 200 square meters in half an hour, something which would take a manual deminer 4 days. So Magawa started his journey in Tanzania. He was born here as part of a breeding colony. Our rats are normally weaned at the age of 10 weeks. After that, Magawa was socialized, and thereafter he started clicker training. Clicker training is a positive reinforcement training method whereby the rat receives food reward for a click. After that, the rat has to do something to receive this food reward, like, for example, finding a target, walking on a soil surface. After that, we started scent discrimination, whereby the rat has to choose the explosive target over another target in order to get the food reward. As so far, we never had any accidents with the rats, because the rats are too light to trigger a mine, so they just gently scratch over the mine. After that, Magawa was moved to our training field, which has various stages of complexity. But at the end of the training, our rats are internally accredited, and we require 100% accuracy over 800 square meters of area. So the rats cannot miss any landmine. We really trust our rats, because very often after clearing a minefield, our teams will play a game of soccer on the cleared field to assure the quality of our work. So far, our rats have impacted more than 1 million people, free them of the terror of landmines.
Well, holy shit, you heard it. At least 1 million people are now safe thanks to Magawa, the other hero rats as they're called, and the workers of Apopo. Together, they are so damn accurate you could play soccer over the land they clear. But if you'd rather, you could head on over to our social media stuffs and swipe on through to see screenshots, screenshots of this video. There, you yourself will be rewarded with photos of Magawa wearing a tiny gold medal around his neck, and another photo of his handler, who is fucking beaming with a smile ear to ear. Now, for a bittersweet update, Magawa died peacefully in early January of 2022 at the age of 8, which is the life expectancy of an African giant-pouched rat. He lived a full life, and to this day, he's the organization's most successful hero rat, and a testament to what the nonprofit Apopo is capable of, and a testament of what can be achieved. My friends, great news. Our hero rats are expanding their horizons. They're about to tell cops around the world to hold their peanut butter-flavored pellets. Quote, "Our study shows that we can train African giant-pouched rats to detect illegally trafficked wildlife, even when it's been concealed among other substances," said Dr. Isabel Zott, a researcher at the Okaneos Foundation and co-author of the study published in the Frontiers in Conservation Science. Co-author Dr. Kate Webb, an assistant professor at Duke University, added, quote, "The rats also continued to detect the wildlife targets after not encountering that species for a long period," end quote. Oh my, my friends, I'm getting choked up. Those targets were pangolin scales, elephant tusks, rhino horn, and a rare wood called African blackwood. Just a handful of animals and plants listed as threatened and at a high danger of extinction. Thanks to the work of Dr. Isabel and Dr. Kate conducted over at Apopo, we now know these hero rats can help track down and intercept the trade. Let's get into it. My equally furry business goose, may I introduce the rats of this study? Christy, Marty, Attenborough, Erwin, Betty, Teddy, Ebony, and yes, Ivory, Desmond, Thoreau, and Fosse. And just like Magawa, they went through several stages of reward-based training, but this time to become international crime fighters. And guess what? I've got some photos to prove it. Swipe on past the handler over at our social media stuffs, and you shall see one of our heroes during the first stage, called indication training. According to the team's October 2024 press release, the rats, quote, learned to hold their noses for several seconds in a hole in which the target scent was placed. When they correctly performed this nose poke, they were rewarded with flavored rodent pellets. End quote. Delicious. After this delicious and informative session came step 2. The rats were introduced to a handful of non-target odors. These included things like electric cables, coffee beans, and laundry detergent. These are the usual pathetic attempts and objects that were frequently used to mask the scent of wildlife in actual trafficking operations. Then, after adding these scents to their whole library of scents, there came a third stage, called the discrimination stage. Rats learned only to signal if wildlife targets were present, all while ignoring those non-targets. And if you swipe past those nose poke photos, for the love of God, you will see one of these rats in a little red vest, attached to a leash, while sniffing some boxes, and I think I'm gonna die, it's that cute. Those vests aren't just for aesthetics, believe it or not. They actually help rats indicate when they detected a scent. I shit you not. Thank you, Alexa. I shit you not. Using their front paws, the rats pull on a small ball attached at the chest. The pull triggers a beeping sound, and that sound alerts the handlers. And yes, I have a photo of that too, because we need joy anywhere we can get it. Now, this sounds like the final stage, but it's not. The last stage in their training is what I think is the most difficult, and that's based solely on my abilities. It's called the retention test. Get this. Rats were reintroduced to scents that they've not encountered for 5 to 8 months. 8 months. And if you're wondering how they performed after such a period of time, drumroll please. Thank you in the back. Quote, despite months of non-exposure, the rats showed perfect retention scores, suggesting that their cognitive retention performance resembles that of dogs. By the end of the training, 8 of 11 rats were able to identify 4 commonly smuggled wildlife species among 146 non-target substances. End quote. You heard that right. Perfect retention. And they weren't distracted by 146 other things. And they had a graduation rate of 8 out of 11. Fuck yes, round of applause. Yes, thank you, louder. Thank you. Now, our rat friends are not going to completely replace our canine friends, that is for sure. But having a rat on the team does have its advantages. Not only are their abilities up there with dogs, but as the Zot explained in the press release, existing screening tools are expensive and time-intensive, and there's an urgent need to increase cargo screening. Apopo's rats are cost-effective, and they're scent detection tools. They could easily access tight spaces like cargo and packed shipping containers, or be lifted up high to screen the ventilation systems of sealed containers. End quote. That is next-level accessibility. And speaking of shipping containers and airports and loud, chaotic places like them, that's the next challenge. These rats need to leave the quiet fields of Apopo in Tanzania and venture into the real world. I have a feeling we'll have a few new Magawas on our hands, and if you'd like to help with their training and help save lives around the world, both human and animal, head on over to apopo.org and donate. It's much easier than clearing a field of landmines yourself. After the break, we're leaving beautiful Tanzania for the stunning Galapagos Islands, an archipelago filled with animals nowhere else. So when one species is discovered, that makes headlines. When it disappears, it breaks hearts. When it's rediscovered well over a century later, you throw a fucking party. Crack open the bubbly. I promise I haven't been drinking already. Stay tuned. Next. And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, I'm going to ask you to slip into your finest bodice and slightly puffed elbow-length sleeves, because we're also slipping into the old time machine and dialing it way the fuck back to 1906. We've landed in Ecuador, and we're loading our luggage onto a steamliner that will take us 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles west out into the open Pacific Ocean. We're heading for one of the last unexplored islands of the Galapagos, Fernandina Island. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who know of the Galapagos but are not quite sure where we are, don't worry, I've got you. Everyone, please imagine the continent of South America. Wonderful. Point to the upper left-hand corner there, along the coast. Okay, there is Ecuador, with the equator slicing across the very top. Now, move your finger a few inches to the left into the Pacific. After 600 miles of nothing but open ocean, seemingly out of nowhere, will rise a series of islands. About 127 islands, an archipelago known as the Galapagos. Like I said, it's 1906, and you and I are currently on an expedition sponsored by the California Academy of Sciences and led by the explorer Rollo Beck. That is his real name, Rollo Beck, and with such a name, I don't even have to describe him to you. You could see him already. Yeah, there he is. Now, good news. Our mission is to land on one of the most dangerous islands here. Not due to any creature, but due to the fact, one, it's hardly been explored, and two, what we do know about it is that this island is most famous for its continuing series of volcanic eruptions. It's more volcano than island, and her name is Fernandina. Let's meet her, shall we? According to Galapagos.org, Fernandina Island first appeared on the navigational charts and crude maps produced by the British buccaneer/pirate for hire Ambrose Cowley in 1684. Anyway, because he was white, he named the island Narborough in honor of another white guy called Sir John Narborough, an English naval commander. But don't worry, it gets worse. Its Spanish name, and what we call it today, Fernandina, was given to honor the murderous King Fernando of Spain, who, you guessed it, sponsored the voyage of Christopher Columbus. Let's talk about some less depressing shit and more impressive shit. If you head on over to our social media stuffs and swipe past all the adorable hero rats, you'll see a collection of Galapagos Islands. All the way to the west, and I mean all the way. That's where we are, on Fernandina. It is the youngest of the islands, and by young, in geological terms, I'm talking about less than 1 million years old. In the past 200 years, there have been 25 known eruptions. And that's not the only fun fact about her. Except for a single visitor site on the northeast edge of the island, no one but permitted researchers, and in this case, us and Rollo, are allowed to venture here. It is the definition of pristine and untouched. Fernandina is only one of 2 islands that has avoided any introduced mammal species. In fact, you can count the number of native mammals on one hand, including fur seals and, wait for it, rats. Yes, rice rats. Despite the name, their diet consists of a variety of fruits, seeds, invertebrates, and even the occasional egg. And honestly, they look like small brown floofs. It's really cute. Anyway, the majority of the animals here are birds and iguana. Animals that are able to fly, dig, or swim to safety when the volcano erupts. So, you could imagine the goddamn surprise on the face of Rollo when he stumbled across a gigantic fucking tortoise. Not only a gigantic tortoise, but one whose physical features, they weren't seen before. this had to be something new. My young business goose, although it was the turn of the century, it was still 1906. And most research relied on basic laboratory equipment, microscopes, and chemical analysis techniques. So if you wanted to know more about an animal, especially one that may be a new species, you had to take the whole thing. And so Rollo took the whole thing. What became known as C. fantasticus, quote, the fantastic giant tortoise, as it was called, he was taxidermied. And to this day, his body is preserved at the California Academy of Sciences. Like I said, this was a male, and you can have a look at him over at today's post. I have a photo up here, and this is a wild-looking tortoise, y'all. If you're too busy discovering an island right now, I can describe him to you. Just start off by imagining a regular tortoise, but make the neck just really uncomfortably long. It's just really long, and the shell is massive and rough. Its shape is really what sticks out here. Think of a saddle, like something you'd put on a horse, and the front of it, like near the base of the neck, I swear, it looks like an LL Bean turtleneck. It really does. It's really thick and exaggerated. The official terminology for this look is, quote, extreme flaring of marginal scutes, end quote. Yeah, say it with me. Extreme flaring of marginal scutes, and that's how it's described by the paper we're about to dive into. Put a pin in that. In the meantime, this guy caused a stir. Not only for his looks, but that no one expected a giant tortoise here. It called for more expeditions. And so it was. Years afterwards, decades afterwards, researchers returned to Fernandina in hopes of spotting another C. fantasticus. But to the dismay of every single explorer, not one tortoise was found. The turn of the 20th century became the middle of the century, and then the late century, and then the 1900s rolled into the 2000s, and the 21st century, and still nothing. Well, not completely nothing. There were some shitty yet tantalizing clues. Literally, 18 pieces of scat were attributed to tortoises in 1964. And get this, a possible visual observation of scat was seen from an aircraft during the early 2000s, and that is impressive all around. Then there was another possible tortoise scat seen in 2014, but needless to say, when all you have in over 100 years is some possible poo, morale isn't very high. C. fantasticus was all but considered gone from the world. 5 years later, though, that was about to change. Quote, finally, in 2019, a surprise discovery triggered a wave of international news that the giant tortoises may yet survive on Fernandina Island. A single female tortoise was found on the lower northwestern flank of the volcano. The tortoise, nicknamed Fernanda, was found in an isolated patch of vegetation cut off from the main vegetated area on the southeast of the island by several lava flows. She's likely well over 50 years old, but is small, with her growth stunted. End quote from today's study. Well, holy shit, my fully formed business goose, a tortoise was seen in 2019, and unfortunately, the only photo I have of her is one she was not ready for. It looks like she just woke up and hasn't had her coffee yet. But yes, that there is a tortoise. And yeah, she looks very different from the male that was found back in 1906. Fern's shell is smooth and exhibits no extreme flaring of its marginal scutes. So, naturally, beautiful nerds like Adalgisa Cacchione, nailed it, a senior research scientist and lecturer in Yale's Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, and Stephen Goran, a zoologist at Princeton University. They had a few questions. Was Fern, in fact, a native Fernandina Island tortoise? Or did she migrate there? Because although tortoises cannot swim, they can float. For real. And thanks to that nifty feature, they can be carried to adjacent islands, like after severe storms, for example. So, to test if Fern was indeed a living C. fantasticus, a blood sample was taken, and the goal was to sequence her genome. The team could compare her genome to the genome of the lone male specimen found over 100 years ago and to the genomes of all other Galapagos giant tortoise species. And before we get into the Jerry Springer-ish test, I want to make it clear that the team did not pull a Rolo. Oh no. Fern is safe. She's safe and sound at the Giant Tortoise Restoration Initiative, aka Iniciativa Galapagos, which is also a fantastic nonprofit if you'd like to consider giving to. According to Galapagos.org, the long-term goal of the initiative is to restore tortoise populations to their historical distribution and numbers across Galapagos, including on islands where tortoises went extinct, end quote. Some milestones include, drumroll please, thank you in the back, by the end of 2017, more than 7,000 juvenile tortoises had been returned to their island of origin, and the first of nearly 2,000 juvenile tortoises returned to Hispaniola. And they reached sexual maturity and have been reproducing naturally on that island since the 90s. That is great fucking news. And prepare yourself. There's more. Those test results came back. And guess what? From the team's paper conveniently titled, "The Galapagos Giant Tortoise C. fantasticus is not extinct," quote, "These analyses indicate that the tortoise found on Fernandina Island in 2019 belongs to the same genetic lineage as the historical C. fantasticus specimen, and that these two individuals are genetically distinct from other species of giant tortoise found on the other islands in the Galapagos archipelago," end quote. Boom, my friends. They are not extinct. And thanks to Fern's DNA, we also know that C. fantasticus is most closely related to those Hispaniola Island tortoises. It's an island, by the way, that's the farthest from Fernandina. I truly need you to take another look at that map of the Galapagos. I have it up here myself, and y'all, Fernandina is all the way to the left, all the way. It's like as far as you can go. And Hispaniola is all the way to the lower right. How did this happen? I mean, I guess they really know how to float, but damn. I am at a loss for words, and researchers are still not sure how this species got here. As to how Fern has been surviving, Peter Grant, an evolutionary biologist at Princeton University, said in a press release, quote, "At lower elevations, the vegetation occurs in island-like clumps in a sea of recently congealed lava. Fernanda was found in one of these, and there's evidence that a few relatives may exist in others," end quote. My friends, Fern has been chilling in the most dangerous places. Recently congealed lava, and she's been eating salad. And like Peter said, there has been more evidence of tortoises, and that evidence is, of course, poop. And you know the old saying, where there's poop, there's life. Thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, telling your friends about giant rats and how they could seal their vaginas and solve crime. Actually, prevent crime. It's even better. Rats. And there's a tortoise. She's just chilling. She's got her own island. It's great. I'm kind of jealous. And a scat-filled thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family, and please, stay interesting.